Why won't you help me? Isn't it obvious? A smile escapes me at the sound of my husband's trembling voice. Seeing the shock on his face, I press further. Ever heard of the phrase, you reap what you sow? I want to share the story of how I, a pregnant woman, cornered my inept husband, and how it became the most satisfying moment of my life. My name is Linda. I'm a 26-year-old remote worker. Reluctantly, I agreed to live with my mother-in-law after being persuaded by my husband, Michael, who said there was a spare room at his parents' house and we could save money. Currently, the three of us live together. Initially, my mother-in-law, Jessica, seemed kind. Or so it appeared. In truth, she probably never was. Perhaps because I work from home, she seems to regard it as inferior to a job outside the house. You have it easy staying at home, so all household chores are your responsibility. Don't even think about slacking off, she said, imposing her rules and making snide remarks if everything wasn't done just so. Being competitive, I hated being belittled with, can't you even do this much, and did the chores begrudgingly. Always having been more efficient than most. It took me just 3 months to anticipate her complaints and retort with, I've already taken care of that, much to her displeasure. She redirected her tactics to interfere with my work. Knocking during work hours, she'd say things like, you missed a spot on the stove, or, I want to eat pork for dinner, so please go buy some pork. Over trivial matters. When I wear headphones and decide to ignore her, the knocks turn into pounding, as if she's hitting the door. Continuing to ignore her would lead her to barge in. When confronted by an irate her asking why I wasn't responding, calmly replying, I didn't hear you, or can it wait? Only showed her self-centeredness. When alone with Michael, I pleaded for him to do something, only to be met with a dismissive laugh and, that's remote work for you. Mom will understand if you explain properly, he said, suggesting I handle it myself. Work is work, whether at home or elsewhere. Deadlines won't wait. At my breaking point, I firmly told her, please don't disturb me while I'm working. I'll attend to your needs later. Only for her to become infuriated. How dare you? Putting household chores second. A woman's first duty are household chores. I won't allow such selfishness. Can't you consider my situation? Do you think someone who can't even fulfill her duties as a wife has the right to say that? I'm not neglecting the housework. It's just impossible to work with constant interruptions, I explained. All I hear is, disturbance this, disturbance that. What a cold-hearted daughter-in-law. The conversation was so frustrating, it gave me a headache. Out of desperation, I put a lock on the door to physically keep her out, which led to Jessica making a scene at dinner. Michael, Linda is being awful. She put a lock on the door to keep me out. After enduring Jessica's ridiculous complaints and offering my rebuttal, Michael's response was lackluster. Putting a lock on the door might be too much. Mom just wants to rely on you a bit. You have time to listen to her, right? With a sigh, Michael took Jessica's side. I'm sorry, but I really don't have the time, I responded, only to be met with his displeased frown. Jessica's whining voice saying, that's terrible, was grating, making me feel nauseous. Although putting the lock on helped me get back on track with work, the lack of support from my husband only increased my distrust. Days later, the nausea persisted, and my health worsened. Suspecting something more, I took a pregnancy test, which came back positive. Realizing the nausea wasn't caused by Jessica but was due to pregnancy was a relief. When I told Michael, who had been in a bad mood, his demeanor instantly changed for the better. When he smiles and gently strokes my belly, I can't help but feel good. His offer to help, saying, is there anything I can do, made me realize he probably had no idea what to do. But I appreciated his concern nonetheless. Meanwhile, Jessica's jealousy of our couple-like interactions intensified her harassment. You know child-rearing is a woman's job, so don't think you can take advantage of Michael's kindness, she would say whenever he went to work. In my time, slacking off wasn't allowed. Even with morning sickness, I didn't suffer as much. It's all about mindset. Enough with the coddling. She followed me around, criticizing my actions and not letting me rest. When you're in this state during pregnancy, whether it's stress or not, I worry about the future. It might be best if I take care of the grandchild when it's born, Jessica said during dinner. Being emotionally unstable, I found myself shouting. The cause of my stress is you, Jessica. Well. What a thing to say. Jessica turned her gaze towards Michael. Wandering aimlessly, Michael said in a feeble voice. Mom means well for you, you shouldn't speak to her like that. As expected, Michael was on Jessica's side. The shock of being betrayed by a seemingly kinder Michael was significant. I wondered if I could even raise a child in this environment. For the first time, the thought of divorce crossed my mind. 3 months passed, the morning sickness subsided, and my emotional instability returned to normal, but Jessica's attitude remained unchanged. She was relatively quiet in front of Michael, but she became emboldened when he turned a blind eye. While I was worrying and consulting with my family, thinking I need to do something about this, Michael was informed of a short-term transfer. He was assigned to a branch in the same state as my parents' home for about 2 years. That's when I had a brilliant idea. I casually suggested to Michael, who was reading rental magazines. Why don't you live at my parents' house since there's room? Disliking complications, Michael immediately agreed. My parents readily approved, and Michael smoothly convinced Jessica, quickly settling the matter of living together. Unlike my in-laws' house, my parents' home was stress-free. Being their only daughter, my parents doted on me. They were already aware of the treatment I received at my in-laws and were far more furious about it than I was. The way my parents treated Michael, now living with us, was rather insidious. Hey, are you still sleeping? Get up and clean around the house. My father would say, waking Michael early on weekends. For my husband, who was used to sleeping until noon at his mother's place, this must have been a torment. Moreover, it was under the watchful eye of my father. What's with that wiping? There are fingerprints. Wipe it all over again. Unlike Jessica, he wasn't pointing out non-existent dirt, but it still felt a bit pitiful to hear. Oh dear, why don't you help with household chores just because you're done with work? You must have been spoiled by your mother. Expecting meals to just appear. My mother, as if in competition, also put Michael to work relentlessly. Michael, good-natured on the outside like Jessica, could only nod and not complain in front of my parents. Come on, Linda, help me out, he said, looking at me lounging in front of the TV. When I reluctantly offered to help, my sharp-eyed mother scolded. Don't make your pregnant wife do chores. Where's your consideration as a husband? Michael looked dejected after being scolded. I thoroughly pretended not to notice. Complaints about a misplaced bath cover, being reprimanded for only being able to work, and a restful weekend became a distant dream. One day, when Michael's sighs at home became more frequent. I've been patient, but this is too much. I'm doing my best here. Finally, at the dinner table, Michael voiced his feelings. But that's just your opinion, said my father. Father is saying this for your sake, Michael. But that way of speaking isn't right, is it? I interjected, backing my father up. Stunned, Michael's lips trembled. Why won't you help me? Of course not, I say, laughing. What? How can you be so cold when your husband is being bullied? You know the saying, you reap what you sow? I asked. Even when I was struggling with your mother, you just ignored it. Remember how you laughed it off and took her side when I asked for help? He must be reminded of something. He just opens and closes his mouth, speechless. I was just following your lead, I said before leaving the room, having said my piece. Left behind, Michael seemed to get a thorough talking to from my parents. My husband, now visibly shaken, endured the usual educational lectures from my parents, saying, "This is also Linda's pain." Though it seemed superficial, he appeared to be reflecting on his actions. A few months later, our daughter was safely born. By then, Michael had become a doting and good father, seemingly well-trained. I was appalled when he said he was caught between a mom and you and didn't know what to do about the harassment. But it's true that he has been much better since we distanced ourselves from Jessica. Thank you for such a lovely daughter, he said, causing me to do a double take. It's amazing how much influence a child can have. I found myself bewildered by the pleasant change. Finally, as our daughter's neck was strong enough, Michael and I visited his mother to show her our child. Jessica smiled and said, "Oh, how adorable," upon seeing her granddaughter. Expecting her to immediately ask to hold the baby, I was surprised when we were instead invited to the living room. "I'll make some tea," My husband, now fully capable of doing household chores, headed to the kitchen while still holding our daughter. Laughing, I said, Michael just can't bear to be apart from his daughter, which drastically changed Jessica's expression. What's so funny? Making your husband do such disgraceful things. Excuse me? He is pathetic. Getting all excited just because a daughter was born. He wanted to keep the baby's gender a surprise until birth. But I should have insisted on testing. A girl, what a disappointment. Jessica's expression was one of utter disdain. Testing. What would she have done if she knew it was a girl from the beginning? I was speechless with horror. You really are a useless wife. Don't expect me to dote on a daughter. I won't bother with her. Just as Jessica said that inside, the living room door opened. Mom, I can't forgive what you just said. Michael stated firmly, causing her to go pale. Michael, I didn't mean. I treasure my daughter. I've realized how inadequate I've been. Linda is too good for me. Please apologize to her. I won't. I'm not in the wrong. It's this insolent wife of yours. Fine. The moment you said we should have tested, I thought you were out of your mind. Come on, Linda, let's go home. Michael reached out to me. No, Michael, please. Jessica's demeanor was that of a woman being abandoned. I stood up, taking my husband's hand. Just so you know, I won't let my family live with you anymore. I'm terrified of what you might do. Michael quietly declared our estrangement. My parents, having overheard everything, were surprised by Michael's stance. My father, slightly disgruntled, muttered, "Our guidance must have worked." While my mother openly rejoiced. While Michael has indeed changed, I'm not fully ready to trust him yet, and forgiveness won't come easily. But part of me is glad he stood up to Jessica so firmly. I plan to keep an eye on my husband's future actions. As for Jessica, she seems unrepentant, still trying to send apologies to my husband. With an apology to me, what's the point, my husband says, clearly exasperated. He's declared that even if we had a son, he would never allow Jessica to meet him. This retaliation, aimed at my husband, inadvertently served as a comeback against Jessica as well, keeping her beloved son away from her. The primary source of our stress. Though my initial intent was solely to get back at my husband. The bonus of giving Jessica a taste of her own medicine makes this outcome all the more satisfying. At least for now, I'm feeling on top of the world.